My son's girlfriend said their dog was in a bad mood, so my son canceled his trip home to see me. Mom, I'm not coming back for the 6th either. If Snowball gets depressed, that's serious. I listened to the cheerful barking on the other end of the line. He had probably forgotten. This was the 3rd year in a row he hadn't come to see me, including Chinese New Year. He had also forgotten that my doctor had just handed me a terminal cancer diagnosis. Mom, why aren't you saying anything? Never mind, I'm hanging up. I still need to take Snowball out to cheer her up. In the dead silence after the call ended, I pulled the 4-tube out of my arm. The nurse came rushing in, panicked, trying to put the needle back in. Miss Shun, you can't do this. Your condition. I pushed her hand away, my face cold. Discharge me. Now. The cancer had spread through my body. Every movement sent sharp pain shooting through me, but I stood up straight. I dialed my lawyer's number. My voice was completely steady. Have a car ready. Take me back to the estate. The car moved smoothly along the road. Then Hayden's call came through. I picked up. Through the speaker came the sound of Crystal putting on her baby voice. Snowball, sweetie, just one bite. This is Wagyu beef, flown in specially for you. Then came Hayden's impatient voice. Mom, what is wrong with you? It's the holidays and you're deliberately making my life difficult? Ever since you got sick, Snowball's been depressed because of you. Transfer $50,000 right now. I need to take Snowball to a pet therapist. If we wait any longer, it's going to get worse. I said nothing. My stomach clenched in waves. This time last year, I had just finished a round of chemo. I had a fever that wouldn't break. I had nearly lost half my life. And my wonderful son had been out skiing in Hokkaido with Crystal, posting a grid of smiling vacation photos on Instagram. He had sent me a $200 Venmo with the message. Asterisk Happy New Year, Mom. Stay warm, drink plenty of water. Asterisk. I cut off the memory. I didn't open my banking app the way I normally would have. I simply asked calmly, Hayden, do you know what today is? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then came an enraged outburst. There you go again with the guilt trip. Is this fun for you? Let me tell you something. You better stay alive a good long time, because if you die, all that money is useless to you. The call slammed dead. I looked out the window at the business empire I had built with my own hands. I thought of all those years, drinking at client dinners until my stomach bled just to close a deal. The only love that had kept me fighting, my love for my son, dissolved completely in that moment. I returned to the cold, empty estate. The living room was stacked with New Year gifts I had prepared for Hayden. The latest gaming console, limited edition sneakers. Every one of them felt like it was mocking me. My chest tightened. The pain took my breath away. Mr. Zhao. I spoke. My voice came out rough. Miss Shin, shall we finalize the will now? No. I shook my head. Draft the first document. Notify all banks to freeze every supplementary credit card under Hayden's name. Effective immediately. The moment the words left my mouth, my phone began buzzing nonstop. A flood of voice messages from Hayden came through. Asterisk, Mom, have you lost it? Why won't my card work? Asterisk. Asterisk, Crystal and I are out right now. Do you know how embarrassing this is? Asterisk. Asterisk, are you insane? Asterisk. I turned off my phone, walked to the study, and picked up the framed photo of my late husband. I traced his gentle smile with my fingertips and said quietly, Gerald, it's time to clean house. I turned to my lawyer. Put out word that my condition has improved, and that I plan to name a successor for the company this holiday season. It was bait. I wanted to see with my own eyes exactly what kind of creature I had raised. Less than 30 minutes after the news broke, Hayden messaged me on Snapchat. A complete 180. Asterisk, Mom, are you feeling better? Crystal and I are getting in the car right now. Please take care of yourself. Asterisk. Asterisk, Mom, what do you want to eat? I'll bring it back for you. Asterisk. Asterisk, Mom, I know I've been a bad son. Don't hold it against me. Asterisk. Reading those copy-pasted pleasantries, my stomach turned. Mr. Zhao and I sat in the living room. I was wrapped in a heavy blanket, sunk into my wheelchair, waiting quietly. Late that night, the door was thrown open. Crystal came in first, carrying Snowball. The moment she crossed the threshold, she started fanning the air in front of her face dramatically. God, what is that smell? It reeks of old people and medicine in here. Snowball leapt out of her arms and tore across the expensive rug, claws raking across the leather sofa. Hayden came in behind her. Not only did he not stop the dog, he laughed. Mom, look, Snowball's just bringing some energy into the place. From the moment he walked in, he hadn't once looked directly at my face, a face that had wasted away almost beyond recognition. Hayden dropped onto the sofa across from me and got straight to the point. Mom, Mr. Zhao said the succession process has started. Has it actually been filed? I gave a vague smile. That depends on how you behave. Hayden immediately slipped into a fawning expression and reached for the kettle on the coffee table. Mom, you must be thirsty. Let me pour you some water. He handed me a cup of scalding water. My body was weak, my hands were shaking. I couldn't hold it. The cup hit the floor. The boiling water splashed across my hand, and a few drops landed on Snowball's fur nearby. Crystal let out a piercing scream. Not for me. For her dog. She lunged forward, pulled out tissues, and dabbed frantically at the few drops of water on Snowball's coat. My baby. Are you burned? Does it hurt? She didn't look at me once, even as my hand began to swell and redden. I stared down at my burned hand, and suddenly thought of the time Hayden had a high fever as a little boy. I had held him all night, wiping down his body with rubbing alcohol, not sleeping for a single moment. Crystal finished comforting her dog, and turned to me with a performance of concern. Aunt Helen, honestly, with your health being what it is, maybe you should consider a care facility. They have professionals there. It would be better for you. She paused, then added pointedly, and it would be a shame to leave this estate sitting empty. I think it would make a lovely place for a wedding. Hayden jumped in right on cue. Exactly, Mom. The energy here is great. It's perfect for us young people. You'd be much better off at a nice facility, and we'd feel so much more at peace. I nodded. All right. I'll think about it. Right in front of them, I pulled out my phone and texted Mr. Zhao. Asterisk inventory all antiques and artwork in the estate. Prepare for transfer. Asterisk. At dinner, the table was full of Hayden's favorites, braised pork ribs, sweet and sour fish. The chemo had destroyed my appetite. All I could manage was a bowl of plain congee. Between bites, Hayden complained. Mom, VP Reynolds at the company is getting completely out of line with me. You need to hand over full authority soon. The next morning, I was woken by the clattering and banging from downstairs. I pushed myself out of bed and made my way to the top of the staircase. Below, Crystal was standing with her hands on her hips, directing a team of movers to rearrange the furniture. She was pointing at my most treasured piece, the rosewood bookcase. The one my husband had loved most. This thing, it's old, it's ugly, throw it out. Just looking at it brings bad luck. Stop. My voice came out sharp. Don't touch that. Crystal looked up at me. Not a trace of guilt on her face. She smiled, sarcastic and sweet. Oh, Aunt Helen, you're up? I figured out with the old and with the new, I'm refreshing the place a little for good luck. And this space would be perfect for a luxury play area for our Snowball. Hayden stood to the side and didn't say a word against it. In fact, he played along. Mom, that bookcase is so dark, it gives off bad energy. It's affecting our luck. I was shaking with fury. I gripped the banister and made my way down the stairs, one step at a time. I spread my arms wide and stood in front of the bookcase. Snowball suddenly charged at me, barking furiously, snapping at the hem of my trousers. Crystal stood off to the side with her arms crossed, watching amused. Look how smart Snowball is, she knows quality when she sees it. She's just not a fan of these old things. I couldn't take it anymore. I swatted at the dog hard. Get away from me. Snowball startled, yelped, and scrambled backward, straight into the display cabinet behind her. Crash. The sound of something shattering cut through the entire room. The blue and white porcelain urn that had been sitting on the top shelf of the cabinet tumbled to the floor and broke into pieces. It had contained my husband's ashes. The only urn. A roar went through my head. My body went rigid. Hayden's first reaction was to point his finger in my face and scream at me. What is wrong with you? Why did you have to yell that loud? If something happened to Snowball, you're paying for it. He was worried about the dog, not his father's ashes. Crystal rushed over too, scooping up the dog, checking her over from head to toe for scratches. She kept muttering under her breath. God, this is so morbid. Dead people's things should have been thrown out a long time ago. Keeping them in the house is terrible luck. My legs gave out beneath me. I sank to the floor. My hands shaking. I reached out to gather the broken pieces. A shard sliced into my finger. Blood fell, drop by drop, onto the pale gray dust. Hayden looked at me on the floor and grew even more impatient. He grabbed my arm roughly. All right, enough of the pity show. Get up and sign the will. Don't make us late for Snowball's grooming appointment. I wrenched my arm away from him. I raised my head. Whatever emotion had been in my eyes was gone. Only ice remained. I pulled myself up off the floor. Hayden took a step back. Something in my gaze had shaken him, but the thought of the money steadied his nerve. He reached for the coffee table, picked up a document he had obviously prepared in advance, and slammed it down. His voice was thick with greed and urgency. This is an unconditional power of attorney over the company's shares. For the sake of stability, you need to sign this right now. Crystal hugged Snowball and chimed in from behind him. That's right, Aunt Helen. You're not thinking clearly anymore. Hayden is the only one who can protect this family's legacy. I looked at the document. It was practically a mugging dressed up in legal language, and the corner of my mouth moved slightly. The silence that followed Crystal's words was heavy, smelling of the fresh dust. From the shattered blue and white porcelain urn and the faint, sweet scent of the tea on the floor. I sat on the polished hardwood floor, my knees aching with a dull, persistent throbbing from the cancer that was slowly hollowing out my bones. My left hand, still wet with the scalding water from the spilled cup, was beginning to blister, but I didn't pull away. I stared down at the small, gray mound of Gerald's ashes on the floor. He had been gone for 5 years. When he died, he had held my hand in the hospital and told me, "Helen, don't work so hard anymore. The company is stable. Spend some time with Hayden. He's a good boy, he just needs his mother." I had believed him. I had spent 5 years trying to be a mother to a son who only saw me as a bank account with a terminal diagnosis. "Mom." Hayden's voice was sharp, cutting through the silence like a rusty blade. He took a step forward, his expensive designer leather boots crunching over the fragments of his father's urn. "Are you going to sign or not? Mr. Zhao is waiting downstairs with the notary. If we don't file the power of attorney before the market closes, the board is going to freeze the budget for the new Maritime route." I slowly raised my head. The pale, sweat-slicked face of my son looked so much like Gerald's, but his eyes, wide, bloodshot, and filled with a dark, desperate greed, belonged entirely to the family who had abandoned me. "Aunt Helen, just sign it," Crystal chimed in, her voice carrying the doting, petulant tone she used when she wanted Hayden to buy her another bag. She was still cradling Snowball in her arms, her long manicured fingers stroking the dog's white fur as if she were protecting a child from a monster. "It's for your own good. If you keep holding on to the shares, the stress will only make the cancer spread faster. Let Hayden take the burden." "The burden?" I whispered, my voice dry and raspy. "Yes, the burden." Hayden snapped, his old, defensive impatience flaring up. "You've been running this company for 30 years, Mom. You think you're the only one who can do it. The world has changed. Anita and I mean Crystal and I have a new strategy. We don't need your old-fashioned methods anymore." I looked at the document resting on the coffee table. It was an unconditional, irrevocable power of attorney, granting Hayden full administrative and voting rights over 70% of the Shun Group's shares. Once signed, I would be legally powerless to stop him from selling the company, mortgaging the estate, or transferring the assets to his personal name. "Mr. Zhao," I called out, my voice quiet but carrying a strange, cold clarity that made Hayden take a half step back. "My attorney, Mr. Zhao," stepped out from the shadow of the study door. He was a man of nearly 60, his hair silver, his eyes behind his wire-rimmed spectacles, filled with a deep, sorrowful respect as he looked at me kneeling on the floor. "Miss Shun," Zhao said, his voice level. "Bring the pen," I said. "Mom." Hayden let out a sharp, trembling laugh of relief. "I knew you'd understand. You're doing the right thing. I'll make sure the care facility in the valley is the best one. They have private gardens." "The notary," I said, ignoring his gratitude entirely. "Let them stamp it." I picked up the pen with my blistered, trembling hand. I didn't look at the warning look Mr. Zhao was giving me. I signed my name, Helen Shen, across the bottom of the page in the clean, precise script I had used to build an empire. The notary pressed the heavy gold seal of the state registry onto the paper with a sharp, definitive thud. "It's done, Mr. Zhao said, closing his leather folder with a soft, final click. "Awesome!" Crystal shrieked, her perfect composure finally breaking as she grabbed Hayden's arm, her face radiant with a triumphant, greedy joy. "Hayden, we did it. The estate. The estate is ours. We can start the renovations tomorrow. Let's get the movers to throw out that rosewood bookcase tonight." "Go ahead," I said, my voice barely a whisper as I slowly pulled myself up from the floor, my hand holding the small, plastic bag of Gerald's ashes tightly against my chest. "Do whatever you want with the house." I turned my back on them, my heavy blanket trailing on the floor behind my wheelchair as I pushed myself toward the master bedroom. As the heavy oak door closed behind me, I could hear Hayden's excited voice in the hallway. "Crystal, call the designer. Tell them we want the private pool in the courtyard. And get the estate agent to list the old villa on the north side." I sat in the dark room, my fingers tracing the bent, cracked pieces of the blue and white porcelain in my lap. I didn't cry. My chest felt empty, almost hollow, as if the last lingering drop of my mother's love had finally evaporated into the cold, quiet room. "Gerald," I whispered into the dark. "Our son, he's ready to rule." The next 3 days were a whirlwind of corporate and residential restructuring. Hayden and Crystal did not waste a single second. By Wednesday morning, the quiet of the Shun estate was completely shattered by the loud mechanical roar of concrete mixers and the sharp, rhythmic hammering of carpenters. The rosewood bookcase, the one my late husband had loved most, had been dragged into the courtyard and smashed with an axe to make room for a custom-built, indoor dog agility course for Snowball. My personal belongings, the hand-woven wool blankets I had bought in Peru, the Old photo albums of Hayden's childhood, and the porcelain sets my father had left me were packed into cheap, black plastic garbage bags and left near the service entrance. Aunt Helen, you're still here? Crystal asked, her voice carrying a sharp note of irritation as she walked into my bedroom, her fingers clutching a clipboard. She was wearing a new, designer leather jacket that cost $12,000, paid for by the corporate card she had somehow managed to unfreeze, using the new power of attorney. I'm leaving this afternoon, Crystal, I said, my voice flat as I sat in my wheelchair, my bags packed and sitting near the door. Oh good, she said, her doting, sweet expression returning in an instant. The movers need to get in here to paint the walls pink. We're turning this room into a luxury walk-in closet for my bags. It has the best natural light, you know. I know, I said, looking out the window. Below in the courtyard, Mr. Zhao was waiting beside a clean, white medical transportfon. Behind him stood VP Reynolds, the chief of operations for the Shen Group, his face grim, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. As soon as the medical transport doors closed behind me, the cold, quiet sanctuary of the van was a relief. Miss Shen, Reynolds said, his voice trembling slightly as he looked at my wasted face, my blistered hand. The transfer is complete. The private trust has been formally established in Switzerland under the name the Gerald and Helen Foundation. And the company? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The Shen Group, Mr. Zhao said, opening his briefcase and sliding a thick legal document onto my lap, is now a hollow shell. As of Tuesday morning, exactly 24 hours before you sign the power of attorney for Hayden, all active patents, the shipping licenses, and 92% of the cash reserves were legally transferred to the foundation. He looked at me, his eyes sharp and unyielding. What Hayden holds now is not a billion-dollar empire, Miss Shen. It is 70% of the voting shares of a company that carries $300 million in outstanding corporate debt, loans that were granted on your personal active guarantee. Now that he has taken full power of attorney, those personal liabilities have been legally transferred to him as the sole director. And the credit cards? I asked. The supplementary cards are no longer frozen, Zhao said, his lips curling into a cold, humorless smile. But the billing address has been changed to his personal name. When the billing cycle ends on the 15th, he will be personally responsible for the $400,000 Crystal has spent this week. I looked at the white wooden cross on my late husband's new urn, sitting on the seat beside me. Let them spend, I said quietly. Let them have their wedding. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a sea of white roses, gold silk, and expensive perfume. The entire high society of the city had gathered for the formal merger banquet of the Shen Group. It was an extravagant, multi-million-dollar affair, complete with a 5-tier cake, synchronized drones flying over the lake, and a live orchestra playing classical waltzes. At the center of the grand stage stood Hayden, wearing a tailored black tuxedo, his hair combed back, his smile smug and victorious. Beside him stood Crystal, her off-the-shoulder white lace wedding gown glittering with thousands of tiny, hand-sewn diamonds. In her arms, she cradled Snowball, who was wearing a miniature diamond collar that matched her own. Tonight, Hayden's voice boomed through the high-fidelity speakers, we do not just celebrate our marriage. We celebrate the dawn of a new era for the Shen Group. My mother, Helen Shen, has formally retired to a care facility in the valley, handing the reins of the family legacy to me. The crowd of politicians, bankers, and capos erupted into a loud, polite applause. At the front table, Crystal's mother sat with her chin raised, her fingers clutching her pearl necklace as she talked to the woman beside her. I told you, Crystal's luck is too good. That old woman was so morbid, keeping her husband's ashes in the living room. It was bringing the whole house down. Now that she's gone, the energy is completely clean. The double doors of the ballroom were pushed open. The chattering of the crowd began to die down, starting from the back tables and spreading toward the stage like a cold wave of frost. It was not me. Mr. Zhao walked into the hall, wearing his plain dark business suit, his face expressionless. Behind him walked VP Reynolds, flanked by 3 men in dark gray suits carrying federal court notices. Don Hayden, Mr. Zhao said, his voice clear, calm, and carrying to every corner of the silent ballroom. Mr. Zhao. Hayden's smile froze on his face. He took a half step back, his hand coming off Crystal's waist. What are you doing here? I told you. Legal documents were finalized. Why are you interrupting my wedding? The documents, Mr. Zhao said, stepping toward the stage, are indeed finalized, Mr. Shen. But the banks, they have just issued a formal notice of foreclosure on the Shen Group's primary logistics terminal. Foreclosure? Hayden's voice rose an octave, his defensive pride flaring up like dry tinder. What are you talking about? We have $100 million in cash Reserves. The cash reserves, VP Reynolds spoke from behind Zhao's shoulder, his voice, cold and unyielding, were legally transferred to the Gerald and Helen Foundation. On Tuesday morning, the Shen Group's accounts currently hold a balance of $0. The crowd of billionaires and board members went dead silent. What? Crystal shrieked, her hand flying to her throat, her designer lace dress looking ridiculous as she looked at her husband. Hayden, what is he talking about? You told me we owned the whole company. Furthermore, Mr. Zhao continued, pulling a thick stack of invoices from his folder and throwing them onto the stage floor. The billing cycle for the supplementary cards has ended. You are personally responsible for the $480,000 in personal luxury expenses charged to those cards this month, Mr. Shen. If payment is not received by midnight, the bank will begin the seizure of your personal assets, including the estate. No. Hayden screamed, his face turning from a healthy, triumphant pink to a sickly mottled gray. He grabbed the microphone from his podium, his hands shaking so violently he nearly dropped it. This is a trick. My mother signed the power of attorney. She gave me the company. She gave you the company, Hayden. I spoke from the speaker of Mr. Zhao's phone, which was connected directly to the hall's audio system. My voice was very quiet, very flat, and completely devoid of the tired, desperate mother's tone he had known. But she did not give you her life. The silence that followed my voice was absolute. The guests at the front tables, the city's most prominent bankers and partners, stood up from their gold-leaf chairs, their eyes fixed on the empty stage where Hayden stood, his face frozen in a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. Mom, Hayden whispered, his voice cracking through the microphone. Mom, where are you? Mr. Zhao, where is she? She's in the valley, she's sick. I am in the private medical wing of the Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York, Hayden, I said, my voice flat. The treatment is fully funded by my personal trust. The trust that your power of attorney cannot touch. You lied to me, Hayden screamed, his hand clutching his chest as he took a half step back, his eyes wild and bloodshot. You signed the paper. You gave me the shares. I signed the shares of a company that carries $300 million in debt, Hayden, I said quietly. The loans that you are now personally responsible for as the sole director of the Shen Group. The banks have already begun the foreclosure. By tomorrow morning, the estate will be seized. No. Crystal shrieked, dropping Snowball onto the stage floor, her hands frantically reaching out to grab Hayden's sleeve. Hayden, do something. The diamond necklace. The deposit on the penthouse. They're going to take them back. Shut up, Crystal, Hayden roared, throwing her hand off his arm with a force that made her stumble into the wedding cake, the white frosting and gold leaf spilling over her white lace gown. Snowball yelped, scrambling backward into the ruins of the cake, her white fur covered in sticky sweet cream. The guests began to scramble for the exits, their faces pale as they realized that the new era of the Shen Group had ended before the first course was served. Miss Shen, the federal marshal standing behind Zhao said, his voice flat. We have the warrants. We are proceeding with the asset seizure. Go ahead, I said, my voice calm and peaceful. The house is empty anyway. I hung up the phone. I sat in my comfortable private room overlooking the East River, the sun shining through the glass windows, warming my hand where the blisters had already begun to heal. On my bedside table, the blue and white porcelain pieces of my husband's urn had been beautifully restored by a Japanese master of kintsugi. The gold lacquered seams shining under the light. Gerald, I whispered, my fingers tracing the smooth, warm gold of the seams. Our house is clean now. The destruction of Hayden's world was swift and absolute. Without the Shen Group's cash reserves, the banks foreclosed on the estate. Within 48 hours, the heavy iron gates of the Shen villa were chained shut, and a large red sign reading property of the federal receivership was pinned to the oak doors. Hayden and Crystal were forced into a cheap, damp basement apartment on the south side, the only place they could afford with the $3,000 remaining in Crystal's personal account. And as for Crystal, her true love did not survive the winter. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Hayden returned to the basement apartment after a grueling, unsuccessful meeting with his bankruptcy lawyers, only to find the door unlocked. The apartment was empty. The designer leather jackets, the diamond necklaces, and the expensive shoe boxes were gone. Crystal had packed everything into her luxury suitcases and left in the middle of the night, taking what was left of his personal savings with her. Even Snowball was gone. She had left a single, scribbled note on the kitchen counter. Hayden, I'm sorry, but I can't live like this. The smell of medicine and cheap soup in this place is driving me crazy. I'm taking Snowball to Miami. My friend has a yacht there. Hayden stared at the counter, his chest rising and falling in a ragged, angry gasp. His face was thin, covered in a rough, gray stubble, his hands shaking as he clutched the note. He had stripped his mother of her dignity, he had thrown his father's ashes in the dirt, and he had ruined his own family's legacy, all to buy a diamond collar for a dog and a designer jacket for a woman who didn't even look back as she boarded a flight to Miami. Mom, he whispered, his voice cracking into a sob as he collapsed onto the dirty linoleum floor of the kitchen. Mom, I'm sorry, but there was no answer. Only the cold rain howling through the cracked basement windows and the distant, uncaring rumble of the city outside. 1 month later, the Sloan Kettering Cancer Center's private garden was quiet, the green leaves of the maples rustling softly in the spring breeze. I sat on a wooden bench, my knees wrapped in a warm wool blanket, my hand holding a cup of hot chamomile tea. My face was still thin, but the gray waxen shadow of the illness had faded, replaced by a healthy, peaceful calm. Miss Shun, Mr. Zhao said, walking down the gravel path, holding a leather folder. The court has finalized the bankruptcy proceedings for the Shun Group. The remaining debts have been settled through the liquidation of the physical assets, and the shell company has been officially dissolved. And Hayden? I asked, my voice calm. He's been working as a casual laborer at the docks, Zhao said quietly. His fingers are covered in calluses, and he's living in a shelter near the port. He came to our office yesterday, Helen. He didn't ask for money. He only asked if he could see you for 5 minutes. I don't have 5 minutes, Mr. Zhao, I said, my voice completely steady, completely at peace. My doctor says I need to rest. We're leaving for Switzerland next week. I understand, Zhao said, bowing his head respectfully. I stood up from the bench, my dark wool coat draped over my shoulders. I didn't look at the high-rise buildings of the city. I didn't look at the newspapers that were still talking about the Shun bankruptcy. I walked back to my room, where the gold-seamed blue and white porcelain urn sat on my nightstand, the light of the sun warming the white wooden cross beside it. The company was gone. The villa was gone. But my husband's ashes were safe, and my own heart was finally, completely quiet. Let's go, Gerald, I whispered, my hand gently taking the handle of the medical bag. We're going home. I closed the door of the hospital room, leaving the empty, dark ghosts of the city behind me in the dust, as my son stood on the wet, muddy docks of Chicago, his hands bleeding from the ropes, his eyes fixed on the empty horizon of the lake where his family's ship had already sailed without him.